Hello and welcome back to Endemic Times. My name is Amira. Even though all of the signs are there and the amount of people and children dying continues to soar, a famine has not been declared in Somalia. Why hasn't a famine been declared, you ask? Well, from everything I have been looking at, it looks a lot like bureaucratic red tape semantic bullshit. Before I get into the particulars of what a famine is according to the experts, let's take a look at the actual numbers, devastation, and people behind this catastrophe. Grab a tissue because, yes, this is heartbreaking. The latest UN data shows that half of the 15 million population of Somalia are facing acute food shortages, with more than 300,000 people expected to be in famine-like conditions by December of this year. The severe drought that has overtaken this region has affected more than 7.8 million people in August of this year. It was 3.2 million in December of 2021. The combination of extreme weather and al-Shabaab extremists is pushing the region into one of the most serious humanitarian disasters in over a decade. Now in its fifth failed season in a row, less than 60% of the usual rain has fallen, and meteorologists warned that the season starting in March could also fail, which would bring about the sixth consecutive season of drought. A drought was formally declared last year, but aid workers are saying this crisis is now critical. Every minute, on average, a severely malnourished child is being admitted to a health facility for treatment. Hospital wards are filling with starving children suffering from measles, pneumonia, and other diseases. In Baidoa, one of the few centers for treatment of extremely malnourished children, the number of children being treated for the worst form of malnutrition has risen fivefold between January and October. Famine is not new for Baidoa. In 1992, at the peak of the famine that was occurring at that time, 15 children died every day, and skeletal bodies littered the streets when a third of the town's population starved to death over 3 months because of failed harvests and civil war. This is why the current situation in and around Somalia is so critical. Almost all of the factors that led to the famines in 1992 and 2011, killing around 500,000 people between them, are currently taking place. A survey of 90,000 children in Baidoa suggests rates of acute malnutrition are on par with 2011. Of the 260,000 people that died at that time, 50% were children under the age of 5. If swift action is not taken, at least 500,000 children will be at risk of death by mid-2023. The current numbers so far for children that have died in 2022 alone is 929, which is more than 3 times as many as the 362 children who died during the same time in 2021. One single graveyard in Somalia has been filled with 230 children. A gravedigger said he interred 17 children in another burial mound, which included young siblings side by side. One mother of 3 was pregnant when she arrived at a camp and had her baby boy, but couldn't produce enough milk to feed him. Another mother left her home after all of her family's 30 goats died. She set out with 6 children but arrived with 5. Her 5-year-old daughter died in her arms under a tree on the first day of the trek, leaving her with no choice but to bury her child on the roadside and continue the journey. I can't even imagine. I just can't. It's 2022. So many of us are surrounded by technology and take so many of these things around us for granted every single day, all while children and families are suffering. This sounds like a scene out of Les Miserables or from the Dark Ages. How is this happening in 2022? Continuing on, Dr. Mohammed, along with 12 nurses, was looking over 70 patients under the age of 5. They lost 7 children last month. He says it's not normal and he will work 24 hours a day for his people and his town. Seriously, these are angels doing the heavenly work. The number of children being admitted for treatment of severe wasting increased by 67% between January and October 2022, with 50% of the 39,994 new admissions in October. With all of these numbers, all of this devastation, a famine has still not been declared. The Minister for Humanitarian Affairs in Somalia's southwest state said he hoped that a famine would not be declared, saying that he believes that they have the opportunity to avert it. The Deputy Humanitarian Director, Claire Sanford, however, said children were continuing to die whether or not the technical thresholds for a famine declaration had been met. Yes, thank you, Claire. These people don't care if the technicalities and the semantics around a famine have not been met. They are living the realities right now. Men, women, and children are suffering from a lack of food and resources and are dying because of it. One elderly man's personal toll is vast. His son died in their village, then his son's wife died during childbirth on a 10-day walk to Baidoa, then a newborn, and then a 3-year-old girl starved to death. All of this now brings us to the IPC, a group of so-called aid experts that classify humanitarian emergencies. They have yet to declare a famine in Somalia, saying that they have found no entire region in Somalia has crossed the threshold of what categorizes a famine, although aid workers are privately disputing that fact. Um, yeah, famine is the most severe phase of the IPC, existing in areas where at least 1 in 5 households has or is most likely to experience extreme deprivation of food. Furthermore, starvation, death, destitution, and extremely critical levels of acute malnutrition are or will likely be evident, with significant mortality being directly attributable to outright starvation or malnutrition, and disease is occurring or likely to be occurring. The IPC approach relies on building a consensus among a team of multi-sectoral experts who are brought together to evaluate and discuss evidence systematically. So, this is where my thought process couldn't help but look at this as a lot of bureaucratic bullshit red tape that just feels like intentional roadblocks for experts to come in, get paid who knows how much money, and sit on their hands. At the end of the day, this group consensus of experts isn't helping. If anything, they're obstructing. Let's think about this for a second. The IPC, who is not directly responsible for actually declaring a famine, are responsible for the classification of a famine based on their specific parameters. The relevant stakeholders, such as government authorities and UN agencies, are the ones to declare a famine. If they declare a famine, that means they are at the least having to acknowledge the situation. Then we have the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs that doesn't want a famine to be declared, and the IPC itself is hesitant to declare a famine because no entire region in Somalia has crossed the threshold of what categorizes a famine. A category they create, then sit around and decide if the experts think it's a famine. First off, none of this helps the people that are living this hell right now. Secondly, I would like to see these experts tell the mothers burying their children on the roadside or the grave diggers having to put siblings side by side in a burial mound that a famine is not occurring. How is this level of death and destruction not considered a famine? How is this number of children being admitted with extreme wasting still not meeting the threshold of famine? This feels like a scam or something to me. But let's continue with the IPC. When looking at their own parameters of a famine, the highest phase, phase 5, would have 20% of households facing an extreme lack of food and 30% of children suffering from acute malnutrition. What we are seeing in Somalia is at least at the emergency level, according to IPC's own acute food insecurity scale. But like the aid workers privately said behind the scenes, when looking at the emergency level phase 4 versus catastrophe famine phase 5, every day is bringing Somalia to phase 5 catastrophe level. Households do have an extreme lack of food, which is why they are fleeing the rural areas and spending 10 days on foot to get to a city center like Baidoa. Starvation, death, and destitution is evident by the drought that is affecting more than 6.7 million people and the 1.5 million children likely to be acutely malnourished by the end of 2022. And 6.4 million people are facing acute water shortages, with more than 1 million being displaced by the drought. However, the IPC's evidence on malnutrition and mortality are only considered to the extent that they are driven by food gaps and livelihood changes due to limited access to food. I wonder if the IPC is going to consider the price of one large cup of rice that supposedly can feed 5 people that has quadrupled to 60 cents during the drought. According to the UNHCR's Protection and Return Monitoring Network, 1,599,000 people were forced to leave their homes in 2022, with 538,000 being conflict-related displacements. I repeat again, how is this not meeting the IPC Phase 5 of an extreme lack of food and/or other basic needs? The IPC even recognizes that conflict, economic decline, natural hazards, and an adequate humanitarian response are the common causes of famine. Somalis are experiencing every single one of these. So why not the recommendation of the experts to declare this a famine? The continued starvation and destitution of Somalis is going to continue regardless of these institutions declaring a famine or not. The destruction of these people and their livelihoods is creating a worsening situation for everyone involved, especially for women and girls. In 2021, 1 in 4 women reported violence in homes as one of their primary concerns. By 2022, that concern rose to 1 in 3. As the concern of food insecurity and starvation continues, it will put women and girls in difficult situations, with the risk of being sexually harassed, assaulted, or even coerced into exchanging sex for food. The drought is also causing women and girls to walk farther to obtain basic resources, which puts them at a greater risk and vulnerability to sexual violence. This drought is also affecting children's education, with more than 3.1 million school-aged children, 47% of them being girls, being directly affected by the ongoing drought. Since the cost of education is usually the first to be sacrificed, over 400,000 girls and boys have lost access to education since January 2021, adding to the 1.68 million already out of school. And around 250 schools have closed due to the drought. Out-of-school children are at elevated risk of child marriage, dangerous and exploitative child labor, and recruitment, which is usually into the Al-Shabaab extremist groups. Why all of this data and factors that are present in the region have not led to a declaration of a famine is beyond me. Like the deputy humanitarian director said, the technicalities of a famine really have no bearing on the actual people that are living this horrific reality. The semantics, red tape, and bureaucratic compartmentalization around the categorization of a famine just feels cold, heartless, and separated from reality. Which is why I can't help but ask the question, why so many barriers to speaking the truth of this situation in Somalia? This is a famine, and it should be declared. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell for when I have new videos coming out. All of the articles referenced in this video are down in the description box below, so you can take a look at those if you'd like. Please feel free to share this video with anyone that you think might find this information helpful. And as always, stay safe, take care, and be kind to each other.